All right. Thank you guys so much for joining us for It's Time to Renew. What do we do? This is our first live webinar of what we will hopefully be offering every month, a live webinar on the fourth Friday of the month. So we're excited that you've joined us, and we hope that you'll join us every fourth Friday from now on. We tried to put it kind of at the lunch hour so that, you know, even for working people, you could maybe just grab your lunch, clock out, and listen to the webinar. And then, of course, if you're not able to join us live, since this is being recorded, we will add it to the website for later use. If you're joining us live, you do get basically face-to-face training hours for this. And if you're joining us via the archived video, then it will be an online hour. And actually, Hannah and I will be talking about the difference between those two as far as what that means for your renewal. So I am Jamie Kelsey. I am a family training specialist here at Foster Adopt Connect, and I am a foster and adoptive parent. I have a 5-year-old little boy right now that I adopted back in August. And I am being joined today by our Director of Resource Development, Hannah Bush. And Hannah, would you like to tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. Like Jamie said, my name is Hannah. I am one of the supervisors of our department. The other supervisor is Kristen Robinson. I have been with Foster Adopt Connect since 2015. I started as an intern, worked my way to be a licensing worker, and now I'm a supervisor. So I'm happy to be here. Licensing is all I've known since I became a social worker. I'm very passionate about it, and I'm excited to be here today.
Great, and I'm so glad because you're the expert. Some of this stuff I can, you know, speak to, but, you know, as far as the back end and what goes on with all of the aspects of licensing, you guys are a great resource for when I have a question. So I'm going to kind of let Hannah run the slides, and I'm going to chip in with whatever I can add and maybe ask some questions. So go ahead with the first slide, Hannah.
Perfect.
So this is our agenda. Hannah, do you want to kind of give them an overview of what we'll be talking about today?
Yeah, so one of the first things we'll review is renewal time frame. Then we'll kind of go into detail about paperwork. Next is we call it the big three, the three main items that need to be kind of your priority as you start the renewal process. Next, we'll talk about training, personal documents that are required for renewal. We'll talk about what references you'll need to renew, as well as go over any questions you guys have about the material we present today.
Great. Okay. So this first one, this is going to be a lot of your department. So do you want to explain to people kind of what you guys do as a family development advocate or resource development?
Right. So casually we call ourselves licensing workers, but officially we are family development advocates. Your licensing worker is basically your caseworker for you as foster parents. So the children in your home have their own caseworker, and then your licensing worker is there to support you in any way possible. So we're there to advocate for you during difficult situations, there to help you have those difficult conversations with anybody on the professional team, help you make some difficult decisions, you know, be there for you when children reapply and move out of the home. So we're there for really anything and everything for you guys as your advocates. So a lot of times your licensing worker before renewal will be checking in with you about trainings, during quarterly visits, and any upcoming renewal requirements that are needed.
Great. I know this one was a struggle for me. When you're a new foster parent, there's just an onslaught of new people in your life, and it's hard to kind of keep straight who is your worker, your licensing worker, and then you know you have all of these other social workers that come with the kids, and so right. You know it took me a while to figure out that licensing worker person, that person is just for me. I mean, not to be selfish or anything, but as a foster parent, if I have a question about my payment or, some form that I have to send in for, mileage reimbursement, something like that, I always forget to check in with my licensing worker. So
yeah, we're really the we're really the go-to person if you have any questions. If your licensing worker can't answer that question for you, if it's more, caseworker related, by all means you can ask your licensing worker, but they will direct you to the person that can best help answer your question, especially if it's child related.
Yeah, good. Yeah, and like you said, even if it's child related, I tend to forget that that's a resource. Even if I'm having a difficult time with a specific case, just because my licensing worker is more, how is my home meeting the requirements, etc., I can still go to my licensing worker and say, whoa, I'm having a hard time. What would you advise me to do? So
right. Yeah, and your licensing worker, at least at Foster Adopt Connect, should be contacting you as a foster family or a relative home at least once a month. We're required to be out to the home every 3 months for quarterly visits. And for those kind of visits, we try to do them ourselves, but if it's kind of a busier month, we have more visits going on than normal. We sometimes send out our assistants as well as maybe a part-time worker or maybe an intern who's been with us for a while. So if your worker comes to you and asks if it's okay if someone other than your actual worker comes out to see you to run through a quarterly, then just expect that.
Okay, good to know.
If you're not okay with that, you can be honest with your licensing worker and say, I'm really comfortable with you. If you don't mind being the one to come out, I'd really appreciate it. And they wouldn't mind at all.
Oh, good. Okay, great. The next slide, we just kind of have an interactive poll here. So a lot of this renewal stuff is time sensitive. And so I'm interested to know, how many of you are planners, maybe a little type A, and how many are huge procrastinators like me. Well, sometimes. Sometimes I'm a procrastinator. Sometimes I'm ahead of the game.
Right.
So yeah, just check in with us there. Make sure you're still awake and with us, right? Yep. What I suspected so far, I'm seeing a lot of type A people. And one, it depends. That's good for us, right, Hannah? Because then if you have people who are procrastinators, that probably makes your job a little harder, right?
Yes, definitely.
Okay. All right. Well, we will go ahead and move on.
Yeah. So this next slide is just to kind of talk about the time frame for starting the renewal process. About 120 days before your renewal, you should be getting a renewal packet in the mail. So that's 4 months before your renewal date. You'll get that in a large envelope through the mail. Our administrative assistant sends those out, so she double checks with your licensing worker here at Foster Adopt Connect that the address is correct, to make sure this family is still renewing, those kinds of things. So she's sending out those renewal packets to you guys. It's really important once you get that in the mail to make that a priority over the next 120 days. Starting in about 90 days throughout the process, you'll get a renewal letter. So we send out 30, 60, and 90-day reminders about renewals. Those letters have very detailed information about what is expected at renewal time. So it kind of walks you through what your renewal date is, when we need all your paperwork by, which is 30 days. We'd like to have everything 30 days out from renewal so that we can have time to write your renewal, go through any questions we have. Maybe you missed sending in a personal document, just to kind of collect those last-minute things to make sure you get renewed in the system on time.
Good. Okay.
Paperwork. This is a big one. Everybody loves paperwork, right?
Oh, yeah. This is kind of what you were saying. It's mailed out about 4 months in advance. Mm-hmm. And so you should just kind of know if you don't get it about 120 days or 4 months before your renewal, you should be checking with somebody.
Right, yeah, and your worker should be sending you out an email close to about that time it's getting sent out to make sure it made it to you. If not, they can bring one at their next visit with you. Maybe you have court together soon and they can, trade it off then. It's also acceptable to turn things in as you go. So if you're more of like, I want to sign all these and send them out so I know it's not on my plate anymore, you can send them to your licensing worker through email if you want to scan them. As long as they're eligible to read, those are acceptable. So yeah, feel free to turn those in as you have things done.
Oh, that will be good. Because I know a lot of us will, in a home with kids especially, you might set something down and then it's gone the next day, or some well-meaning spouse cleaned the house and where is that paper I set on the countertop, right?
Right, yeah, and it's super important to make sure you get started right away because your licensing worker could have up to maybe even 3 or 4 renewals going at the same time. And if you don't turn everything in right away or hit that 30-day deadline, those other renewals will then become a priority over yours because we're still waiting on things to renew. So essentially we don't want other families to suffer if they have all their stuff in and they need to renew on time. So it's just really important to, make your license a priority right around renewal time and just to make sure things run smoothly for your worker to get that done for you.
Sure. Okay. Great. Now this next one, I was really kind of curious about when I saw it on the slide. So I knew you were going to explain it a little bit more. So tell us about the big 3.
Yes. So these 3 things are typically, we call them the big 3 because we think they're the most challenging parts of getting the renewal process going. So we like to think that these big 3s are the things that should be your main priority when starting renewing. So the first one is fingerprints. So lately we've had a lot of changes within the home not within the home, just with the process of fingerprinting and how we get those results back. So everybody in the home has to be fingerprinted at the age of 17 or older, and that is only biological or adopted children at 17 or older. So we don't need fingerprints on any foster children or anything like that.
Right, okay.
Yeah. So we started with a new program. So if you get fingerprinted this year moving forward, you will not have to be re-fingerprinted again at the time of renewal. So we signed up for something called the Wrap Back program, and anytime something new comes on your fingerprint record, we will get notified of that.
Oh, good. Okay, very good.
So it kind of essentially makes it a little easier for everybody moving forward with fingerprints. But like I said, we're just now starting that, so everybody, even if you've been licensed before, has to get fingerprinted with this new program to qualify in that.
Okay. See, yeah, because I was going to ask you, and I didn't mention before, I do foster in Kansas, and we only had to do the fingerprint process once. So I was going to ask you if it had to be every 2 years. But it sounds like that will make it a lot easier for families and you guys.
Right, yeah, most definitely. So the next one is medical exams. So every family member living in the home, excluding foster children, has to have a medical exam completed. This one's probably on the big 3 because sometimes, I know for myself and my primary care doctor, it's hard to schedule an appointment last minute. So if we give you that 120 days ahead of time, I would call your doctor or nurse practitioner right away to get that scheduled and out of the way for you.
Yeah, makes sense.
Right. So for trainings, this is a big one. Your worker, like I said, should be talking to you about this about a year in to your renewal period, if not sooner. So for first year foster and relative parents, you have required first and second year trainings, and those are provided in a Word document with links. And we can also print out those articles for those who do not have internet access. But those first and second year required trainings, as well as CPR first aid, have to be completed before your first renewal. Now, if it's your second year or your second renewal period, you've done the first and second year trainings, the renewal period previously, the only required training is the CPR first aid to make sure that that is current.
Okay, great. Yeah, this is definitely one you don't leave to the last minute, because you might be able to finagle your way into the doctor, but it's hard to finagle 30 hours of training right before your renewal. So I know I get a
Right.
lot of people in our training classes, and I start seeing those people every time we have a training, and I know that they might have waited till the last minute to get some of
They're
those training hours done. Yeah, so don't wait till the last minute.
Right. So our traditional and our behavioral homes, so traditional foster parents or level A homes only need 30 hours. This has kind of been confusing for some because I know in the past we required behavioral homes to have 32, but technically by policy it's only career level homes, level B homes that need 32 hours.
Oh, okay. Good to know.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know if you wanted to add anything else, Jamie, about training. I know definitely this webinar and then, things moving forward will make it a lot easier for families to renew.
Yeah, just we have, keep in mind, we have trainings the first and third Fridays of every single month. And I know we talk a little bit more in a later slide about, what specific trainings you need for first and second year. But, as far as maybe this isn't your first renewal, so you're just trying to fill in, you've got that CPR, but then where else do I get my 30 hours? We have those trainings. Then if you go to Cornerstones of Care, they have a calendar of trainings, not just through their organization, but they have our trainings. They have several other organizations that offer trainings of varying hours even. So if you're like, I want to knock out 5 hours or 6 hours. I don't want to mess with a 1 hour here or 2 hours there. They have lots of different offerings of varying times. So check that out.
And Carrie, back to your question about is this only applicable at FAC, we are subcontracted with Cornerstones of Care, so they should be following that protocol as well.
Good question. I'm glad you saw that.
Yeah. So we'll go into more detail about background checks. So we already mentioned the fingerprints that need to be completed as soon as possible. So the next one is our Family Care Safety Registry background check. And then we run a CaseNet check as well as a child abuse and neglect check. So that child abuse and neglect check would be reviewing any hotlines that you've had within the last 2 years, just kind of seeing if there's any new activity there, any concerns we need to address, or any safety plans maybe that Children's Division would like to see moving forward. But those, like I said, should have been done at the time of a hotline or anything like that.
Okay, that's something the licensing worker does, is checks all of those. Okay.
Correct. Yes. Sorry, I should have mentioned that. So the only one that we involve the family in, we need their help to complete, is the fingerprints, because you have to physically go and get those done. Now the following 4 of those, we just have forms that we get your consent to run, and then we just run them and make sure they're in your file with the date prior to your renewal.
Right. Okay.
Good catch. Alrighty. Next is medical exams. So like I said before, it's important to allow plenty of time to give yourself time to schedule those appointments. Each adult living in the home over the age of 17 needs a medical exam. So if you have a grandma living with you, an aunt, maybe your brother, he might live in the basement, doesn't really have any particular involvement with the kiddos. If they're residing in the home, they still need a medical exam, as well as any biological or adopted child under your license and in the home.
And so your worker provides you a form that you take to your physician. It's not just, hey, here's proof that I went, like you take your...
Correct.
I don't know.
So just like when you got originally licensed, it's the exact same form. We just need an updated copy of that. So that medical form for everybody in the home should be in that packet, and if not, your licensing worker can make copies for you.
Okay, great.
So yeah, it's really important that we use our form. A lot of people ask if they can use like physical forms from sports, or maybe they've had a recent exam and they have the results that they want to give their licensing worker. It's really important that we have our form filled out, because there's a lot of specific questions as to if your physician approves you to be a foster parent to care for children. I think that's
Yeah, that
really
makes
all
sense.
for that side.
I used to be a school teacher, and so when I got into foster parenting, again, different state, but they took the physical form that I used for my school district. So in this case, bear in mind it does have to be Foster Adopt Connects form if you're renewing with us before your licensing agent.
Mm-hmm. And it's also acceptable if you've had a medical exam within the last year of your renewal. You can have your doctor fill that out for you using that date. So it just has to be within the year of your renewal. So we know a lot of insurances only cover one exam a year, so we want to make sure we accommodate for that.
Sure. Okay, great.
All right.
Now my favorite part.
Yeah. I don't know, you want to take the lead on that one?
Yeah, sure. So since CPR is first on this list, I want to make sure everybody knows that we have instituted a new way of doing CPR. We are still offering in-person classes, but we, at the beginning of this year, also rolled out what we call a blended learning format. And so if you sign up for that, then there's just a set of online learning modules that you'll complete. And then after that, you have to sign up for a checkoff time. And what you do when you come in for that is you really only spend about 20 to 30 minutes here with the instructor, making sure, running through the actual physical portions of choking or CPR using an AED. And so once they check your skills, then you're free to go, and they give you a certificate at that time. So that's something now that we're offering checkoff times twice a month, and then we try to offer still an in-person class. For those of us who are not maybe so technologically savvy, we are still offering an in-person class at least once a quarter. Now, the other ones on here are, for the most part, ones that we don't actually physically train here. I think you mentioned before, Hannah, that things like the medication training or the car seat safety are given on a Word document, or I think with one of these there might be a webinar that you take, like trauma care. There's some documents that you review, and then a short webinar that you take on Children's Division website. But Ready, Set, Fly is one that we actually offer in person here. And that's a great one too, because you can knock out 5 hours of your renewal hours with that one. So
most definitely. And yeah, like I said, the medication training, the trauma care training, and the laws, policies, and procedures, I know those are definitely on the Word document that you can click on links and go to read articles, or sometimes they're videos. And then underneath that, on that Word document, it just has a little spot for you to write in what you learned from that training. So at the end of that form, you just sign it and give it to your licensing worker, and then they can give you credit in the system for taking those trainings. The HIPAA form, though, is just a form that you sign, and you get an hour credit for signing that form and just being aware of HIPAA.
Bonus, right?
Yeah. So for your second year training, just like the first year, sibling placement, I believe we do that one in person as well, right, Jamie?
We do.
Okay, perfect. You can also do that as an article to read. I don't remember off the top of my head, but there might be a video with that one as well. So you'll just follow that like all the other trainings on those forms, as well as healthy relationships. But prudent parenting, I believe, is a PowerPoint, and you can also do that. I believe we have an old webinar on our website about that, correct?
We do. So the secondhand smoking and prudent parenting were kind of interesting. I found those on Children's Division website, and you could read the materials. There were several videos, especially with secondhand smoking, that you could review, and then after you reviewed them, then you would just print out the certificate. So what we did, you can still find this on our website, is we just kind of put all of those documents, all of the videos in one place. So it would be kind of like a recorded webinar if you want to access that on our website. and you still get the certificate afterwards.
Perfect.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, we already kind of talked a little bit about, I mentioned the training calendar. You can, of course, you can check Foster Adopt's website. We have all of our trainings on a calendar. But again, if you go to Cornerstones of Care website, it's our trainings, it's any trainings that Cornerstones of Care is presenting. Sometimes Crittenton will have trainings that they will publish on that calendar. And so you have a wider variety. You know, if Foster Adopt Connect, we do ours on Fridays, and if that just doesn't work for you, you know, it would definitely be worth checking out the Cornerstones calendar so that you can see when the other organizations are offering their trainings. So you would sign up for most of those through Cornerstone's website. Hannah might be able to speak a little bit more about books and movies. I've seen the form, the training request form, and I don't think it's just any old book, any old movie, right?
Yeah, we have a list of books and movies and articles that are approved through Children's Division to count for credit. So your licensing worker can send you this list, and then they'll also send you a training summary form, and that kind of walks us through what training you took, and then how many hours credit it is. So I also want to mention about how to sign up. You can also let your licensing worker know that you're interested in, let's say, this certain subject, or you want to get into the next Ready, Set, Fly. Your licensing worker can also sign you up for any training that you're interested on our calendar. So they can assist you with that if you're not quite so savvy online as well.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then just be careful with, you know, we are working to put out a lot more webinars on our website, and you might be aware of other organizations or websites that have online trainings. Just be mindful that only half of your hours can be, or it's a little less than half of your hours that can be online or through another method like books or movies. So, you know, if you're a traditional foster parent, 16 have to be in person or kind of instructor-led classes, and 14 up to 14 can be online, right?
Right. Yep. And there's also approved self-trainings. Let's say your church puts on a training that involves children, or maybe you work in a child setting that it would qualify for some training for you. Run those by your licensing worker, and they can let you know if that's acceptable or not. And then as long as you approve or provide your licensing worker with a certificate or some form of documentation as to how long that training was, we can give you credit for that and make sure it's in your file. And just like any other training, as long as you make sure your licensing worker gets a copy of a sign-in sheet or the certificate at the end of the training, we can give you credit for that.
Okay, and if that's in person, like if I take a training through my church, if that's in person, then that would count towards instructor-led or in-person hours?
Yes.
Perfect. Okay, great.
Yeah. Matthew, I think your question is if this webinar would count as an in-person training.
Yes.
Am I right when I say yes? Okay.
Yes, it does. So any of our live
training.
Yeah, our live webinars will count for in-person or instructor-led, because the key is you want to be able to interact. So anytime that you're able to interact with the instructor, you know, we can make sure that you're getting a more rounded training than if you're just interacting with the website. So those hold more weight with us.
Correct.
So yes, it does count.
Okay. So I'll go into more detail about those trainings that are books or movie and how you count for credit for those. So books are approved for 1 hour for every 100 pages you read. Like, again, we'll just reiterate, you can only use 14 hours of self-trainings that are in person within the 2-year licensure period. So the other half have to be in person at Foster Adopt Connect or Cornerstones of Care, anywhere that really that's putting on a training or one of these live webinars.
Okay.
Yeah, so any movie.
Do you have any examples of like? Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I was just continuing on with the next bullet that, for any movie, it's rounded to the next half hour to give you credit for that hour. And then, again, for each in-service training request form, let me reword that. So any training that's not in person, you have to complete that training summary form, and your licensing worker can provide that for you.
Okay, good. My question to you was, do you have kind of an idea or a short list off the top of your mind of what books or movies you've seen come through that you guys have approved?
I know some of the more fun ones that I see, The Blind Side, Despicable Me, surprisingly.
Really?
The new Instant Family, I believe, can count as credit hours. Really anything that has an adoption or a foster twist to it is acceptable. But like I said, there's a long list that your licensing worker can provide you. So just send an email, phone call, or a text, and we can make sure you have a set of that.
Sure. And then I know as far as books, I'm sure The Connected Child would probably make that list.
Yes.
I know I could list off maybe several others, and if you're not licensed through Foster Adopt Connect, it's probably worth just checking with your licensing worker, whoever your agency is, just so that you don't invest several days or weeks reading a book that maybe you had only started because you thought, well, I can get training credit for this. Maybe just check with your licensing worker.
Right. Yeah, I think that's a good idea as well.
Good.
Okay, so references. This looks a lot different than originally licensed. So when you're originally licensed, we're required to get two relative references and then 3 non-relative references. So when it comes to renewing, we only references for your employers if you changed employment since originally becoming licensed or since your last renewal. And for school references, we need those every time. So those are the only 2 required references that we have to have if there's been changes in employment, and we need school references for biological, adopted, as well as foster kiddos in the home.
Okay, gotcha. Yeah, I was going to ask for some clarification on that. So only for the adults, only if their employment has changed, but then school references would be each renewal period.
Yeah, and that's just to make sure, as foster parents, we're following up with school, we're addressing concerns, and just, making sure that things are going well in the school system, and that we're being, communicative with, professionals, teachers, anything we need to be with the school.
Sure. And then just to go back to books and movies, we had a question about the movie Breakthrough. I think that's the one that just came out with Christy Metz, if I'm not mistaken. Do you know anything about that one, Hannah?
I don't.
Okay. Well, that might be a little bit too new. That might be one that you just want to check with your specific licensing worker. It seems like if we can maybe show that it does have themes that go along with foster care and adoption, sometimes they are able to get those approved.
Yeah. So next is personal documents that are required. So we need the most recent tax return upon renewal. We need an updated car insurance as well as registration. We need current pet vaccinations to make sure that the rabies vaccine is current. We also need a copy of your driver's license if it's expired, as well as if you've had to change your address or a phone number or anything on your original license or paperwork. So your licensing worker at quarterly visits should be asking if there's been any changes in your car insurance, registration, anything like that. And so if it's not even renewal time and you want to give them a personal document that's changed, by all means you can send that to them through a text or an email, or they can take a picture of it while they're at your home and print it off at the office and get it in the file.
Okay. And see, for me as a foster parent, I want to go to the pet vaccinations because that is one of the don't don't procrastinate on that one, because if you have a lot of pets like I do, sometimes the added expense of getting 4 pets into the vet is a lot. So we found that if we could get ahead of it a little bit, we could stagger them, and not have to get hit with that all at once.
Right.
Okay, so the walkthrough, is that where you or their licensing worker will come through?
Yes. So just like during quarterly visits, before your renewal, we'll come out to the home and do a safety walkthrough, or if you have a visit right before renewal, we can do it then and fill out our form. That safety walkthrough looks the same anytime we're in the home, so we're making sure that weapons and ammunition is stored appropriately. So for that, we just have to make sure that weapons are locked away and that the ammunition is stored and locked away separately from that. So the only exception in having it in the same area would be like a safe within a safe, so you can lock your ammunition in the safe and also lock the safe that the weapon is in, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah, so also just making sure your medication storage is out of reach of children. We don't want any temptation in there. We just want to make sure everybody's safe in the home so that's out of reach. Surveillance cameras in the home are acceptable. This can't be anywhere where a child would change. So
let me have you go back to surveillance cameras a little bit. I don't know if it's our internet here, but we had you cut out just a little bit. So tell us again a little bit about surveillance cameras. I hope we didn't lose her. Okay, I'm going to give her a minute to try to get back to us. So we will go on with some of the other points on the checklist, and Hannah, let me know if you're when you're able to come back online. So obviously you want to have your fire extinguisher, make sure that that's within the proper expiration date, your smoke detectors, and making sure, of course, that they are hooked up if you're like me and the cooking gets out of hand sometimes. I know I've been in the situation of having my licensing worker come for a walkthrough, and that good old, I call it an oven timer, is sitting somewhere because I unhooked it. So making sure those are hooked up and, have batteries, as well as your carbon monoxide detector, of course, as well. And let's see, Hannah, are you back with us?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yeah, okay. Don't know what happened there.
What happened? That was weird.
We lost you somewhere around surveillance cameras. I just wanted you to go back and touch on that one.
Oh, yeah. So we can't have surveillance cameras anywhere where a child is changing their clothes, so nowhere in the bedrooms or in the bathrooms of the home. So you can have them in the main living areas, around the front door, any place just where there can't be a child changing on the camera.
Sure, that makes sense. Yeah. Okay, good.
Okay, so these are reasons why your license may not be renewed. Can you still hear me, Jamie?
Yeah, loud and clear.
Okay. Yeah, so a policy of ours is that if you do not have placement within a year during your licensure period, then a discussion needs to be had with you and your licensing worker about potentially closing your licensure. We really just encourage families to take placements at least once within that year period so that we can keep you current on what's going on policy-wise changing. If we don't really have placements in the home, it's hard for us to stay in the home and just keep current on your license. So
yeah.
Yeah, okay, great. Another reason would be a lack of training. So if you're getting all these reminders about how many training hours you have, you're getting those 30, 60, 90 letters, you received your packet, and you still don't have training to complete, you're probably going to have to talk about closing your license because it's just going to expire and then would be expired if you got that training made up.
Mhm.
Another reason would be not completing paperwork timely. So if you expire and you don't have any paperwork done, your licensing worker having a hard time getting a hold of you, we might have to send out a letter or find some way to communicate in a way to ask if doing is something pour your energy into and get completed.
Okay.
Another reason would be not meeting parent competencies. So the competencies of the license as a foster parent, those are crucial to being licensed. So we review those in our professional development plans with our families every 3 months. And if in between the time of you being licensed you're not meeting one of those competencies, we're there to have that discussion with you to see how we can get you back on track to be able to meet those. So we will implement safety plans. We might suggest training, anything that might support you as a foster parent to support the kiddos best in your home.
Right.
Another reason would be completing those medical exams, or not completing fingerprints or turning in your results to your licensing worker. So a portion of renewing is kind of some legwork on the family. So we're willing to work just as hard as that family is to get renewed and get things done, but it's really just about being motivated to be licensed and continue to be licensed. And we really just, if we're not seeing much motivation on a foster parent's end, we don't know how motivated they are to be a foster parent. So we really try to assess that at that time if we don't have a lot of things completed.
Sure.
So the last one on there is pending hotline. So unfortunately, if you do have a hotline right at the time of renewal, the state puts your license on hold, and we can renew until your license is off hold, which is after the investigation is complete.
Okay. Okay. Now we've got another question here. We might actually come back to that once we get through to the end, if you don't mind, so that we can kind of focus on all of that for your question. So we're almost done, and then we will take care of the rest of the questions at the end. So
Perfect.
Going on to our final step.
Yeah, so like I mentioned previously, we would like to have all of your renewal paperwork 30 days before renewal. So that 30 days gives your license worker time to review everything, write that renewal, turn it into their supervisor for edits. Then they get that renewal back from their supervisor, make any changes needed, and then they should be following up with you to ask if you'd like to read it, if you'd like to review it, make any changes or suggestions that you might have. And then after you let them know, they will print that off and then come out to your home to sign it.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, so we kind of have some typical questions you guys see as licensing workers or resource development advocates. Cover some of those before we get to kind of our real specific questions for participants.
Sure. So one of the frequent questions we get is, what happens if I don't renew my license on time due to not turning everything in on time? So if we do not have everything we need 30 days prior to renew, we encourage our workers to put that family's license on hold. So we do that for the main reason of payment. So we don't want a child being placed in your home and you having to care for that child, and if your license expires, you will not receive payment until you renew. And that's a big concern for families, just because we know, caring for children is not cheap. It's definitely not a moneymaker. So we really just encourage that renewal on time so that those payments continue without a hiccup.
Sure.
Yeah. So the question is how long it will take for maintenance payments to resume. Typically, it really just depends on your date of renewal, but it should pick back up with the next payment date, which is usually the middle of the month.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then, of course, why do I have to fill out the same forms again? I'm sure you hear that a lot.
Question all the time. And really, just the straight up answer is, we're renewing for a new licensure period, and we have to have paperwork for that new licensure period. So we have to have current dates on everything, which makes your file up to date. And then once you're renewed, a lot of the times Children's Division will ask to see your file to make sure that everything in the file is current. So we want to make sure that we're on our toes to make sure that if your file gets pulled for audit, things are looking great in the shape for your file.
Yeah, because at the end of the day, I mean, this, we're doing a pretty important job here as foster parents, and, we want to make sure that the agency is covered and that you're covered as the foster parent, of course. It just kind of helps us protect you, I think.
Correct. And I guess kind of another thing to mention about when payments will resume, if your license is expired due to on the foster parent's end, so let's say you haven't turned in your medicals or you haven't completed all of your training, when you are renewed and your license continues, you will not receive any of that back payment due to not renewing on foster.
Yeah, another kind of motivator to not procrastinate, maybe?
Sure, yep. And we don't want that to happen as licensing workers either. So we're really encouraging of making sure we have everything by that 30 days, and if we don't, to make sure that we have that before the renewal date.
Yeah. So these are some good tips. I can definitely attest to the first tip because, like I said, I see a lot of families coming into our trainings here, and I see them over and over and over again because they are kind of scrambling to hit those training hours by their renewal period. Definitely not a position that you want to find yourself in, right?
Right, yes. So the next one is, again, just start the renewal process as early as you can if you plan on renewing. And actually, your licensing worker can renew your license up to 3 months in advance. So if you have everything done and your worker's on top of it and has your renewal written, then you can renew right away and just not skip a beat when your renewal date comes.
Right.
Yeah. So the big three things we talked about earlier in the training, so making sure you're getting fingerprinted right away when you get your packet, making sure that you're scheduling those medical exams for everybody in the home, excluding foster kiddos, and then, just making sure that you're on top of your training. So those are the biggest three things to be able to renew, and those three things really rely on the foster parent to get done. So as long as we have those bigger item pillars of renewal, then it should be a breeze for you.
Sure, and then going back to those fingerprints, so will a family know when they are kind of already a part of that program where
yes.
You'll get their fingerprint results updated? Okay.
Yeah, here at Foster.Connect, we are kind of working on a tracking system to make sure, we're keeping track of which families are in the RAT-BAC program versus families who are yet to been printed within it. So your licensing worker will let you know at the time you get your packet if fingerprinting is necessary for you or not. But if anything in the near future, it will be just because we just started that program recently.
Okay, good.
Yeah. Just when in doubt, ask your licensing worker. They're great resources and advocates for you. So just making sure that you're keeping them in the loop with any questions you have, and then we can make renewal a success.
Yeah, good. So I wanted to address kind of something that came out here recently, maybe just briefly, and then specific participant questions we can answer after the recording ends. But Hannah, can you speak a little bit to the new rule where Children's Division is kind of tightening down on making exceptions and kind of capping homes out at 5 kids? Do you know much about that yet?
I do. So I can kind of tell you what I do know and kind of what the facts are. For Foster.Connect, your licensing worker probably sent you out an email maybe 2 weeks ago or a week ago about kind of what those rules are and what those rules mean. So any family who has 5 adopted or biological children, they have to close their license if they do not have placement right now. If you do have 5 adopted or biological, and you have a placement, so if it's a relative home, then that is okay. So there should have been an exception made at the time of licensure to make that number okay.
Okay.
For foster homes, if you have a long-standing relationship with your placement, so let's say, Joey's been in your home for over a year now, or even less than that, if you have a really good bond with that child can stay in your home until permanency happens. So either you adopt them, they reunify, or they find permanency with another foster family. They can stay with you until that permanency happens, and then you have to close your license due to being over capacity at the 5 adopted or bio.
Okay, gotcha. Yeah, I know we've been having a lot of questions about that lately, and
right.
a little frustration, so I wanted to touch on that.
Yeah.
And then, specific questions, look at us sliding in right at an hour. So I'm going to go ahead and end the recording. And then if you want to hang around and ask some more questions of Hannah and I, feel free. We can even unmute you and speak to you. But once this training is over, you'll get an email. Make sure that you take the survey, because it's after you take the survey that you'll see that PDF document to print. That is your certificate of completion for this webinar. So don't miss that. But otherwise, thank you so much for joining us. And like I said, you're welcome to stick around for a little bit to ask some questions.